Good afternoon and welcome to the Touchstone Exploration Inc. Investor Update presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. It could be submitted anytime via the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. Just click Q&A, scroll to the bottom, type your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll. I'd also like to say it's fantastic. We have so many of the Touchstone Exploration team with us today. So I'll start with the list. We've got Paul Bay, President and CEO, Scott Baldai, CFO, James Shipka, COO, Brian Hollingshead, VP of Engineering and Business Development, Xavier Monan, Manager of Exploration, Lynn Anderson, Manager of Subservice, Christopher George, General Manager of Operations, and Ria de Gorville, Manager of HSE. I'd now like to hand you over to Paul Bay, President and CEO. Good afternoon, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul, for the introduction, and welcome everybody. Today, I think we've got a really interesting presentation for you. And really the concept for today is to give you a little more detail on some of the things that you've maybe seen in some of our previous presentations, and as well as meet some of the other members of the team that I'm sure a number of people haven't seen before. We're going to break the presentation down into a number of different areas. We're going to start out just doing a quick financial review of the information that was provided about a week ago. In our year-end numbers. We'll work through some of the reserve numbers, then we'll go into a fairly quick look at the legacy properties, and then what I'll call a deep dive into the Ortoire property, which obviously is a lot of the focus for us and for shareholders. So we'll break that down and update you on a number of things going through there. And then we want to finish off with some things that are very important to us, both the HSE and the ESG and sustainability portion. And after that, as Paul mentioned, I'll give a quick little wrap up, and then we'll answer any questions that you might have. So the concept for today is, as I mentioned, is to meet more of the team and really understand the inventory of opportunities that we have, and hopefully give everybody an update on where things are at. So let me start out. I'll turn it over to Scott, and he can run us through the numbers from last week.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning or afternoon, everybody. As Paul mentioned, my name is Scott Boudel. I'm the CFO. Just a quick opening financial slide for everyone. This slide summarizes our current capital structure and our 2021 financial results. I'll not go into too much detail given these were released on Monday, but I think there's two key highlights to point out, and that would be our net earnings report in the year and our funds flow from operations report in the year. 2021, we actually had net earnings of 5.7 million. This reversal was was based on an impairment reversal that was previously took in 2019. I think the key takeaway here is that obviously the crude oil strip price increased during the year, but this is also really based on our strong reserve book that was released back in early March 2022. So I think the team will discuss that further, but really was a good booking this year. From a funds flow perspective, our legacy crude oil properties continue to be cash flow positive. We reported funds flow of approximately 4.1 million in the year, and the fact that we continue to continually cover our overhead while we increase our workforce, increase our administrative functions that allocate towards Ortoire is really a key highlight. I think that shouldn't be overlooked. And moving on to the balance sheet, we exited 2021 with approximately 18 million in cash and 20 million in net debt. And I think the key takeaway every investor should have after this presentation is in 2022, our main priority is increasing production and increasing cash flow from our Ortoire discoveries. And to that end, I think our balance sheet, we are fairly comfortable that we have ample liquidity to fund the remaining Coho pipeline costs, which are occurring as we speak, and then our budgeted Cascadura facility costs, which we are currently budgeting at approximately $9 to $10 million. Finally, I just would like to point out that our 2022 annual meeting of shareholders will be held virtually on June 9th, 2022. And for those investors who can attend, we hope to see or hear from you then. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Hollingshead, VP of Engineering and Business Development. I'm going to start off with some reserves data. Over the last 3 years, our reserve book has grown significantly, thanks much to the successful Ortoire exploration program. On a 2P basis, we've had 85% annual growth in reserves to the current 76 million BOEs. And we've also achieved a nice balance of commodity mix across gas and oil reserves. Similarly, we've seen significant growth in reserves value, NPV10. Over 60% annual growth in NPV10 to about $536 million 3P currently, which compares to current market cap of about $250 million.
Thanks, Brian. I'm James Shipka, Chief Operating Officer here at Touchstone, and I'll just reintroduce or summarize here our land holdings. To the southwest section here in Trinidad, we've got our long life, low decline legacy oil acreage. This is sweet to light and medium grade oil. Been on production for quite some time. And then to the east, we have the Ortoire exploration block, which will be the core of the majority of the discussion we have here today. Taking a little bit deeper look at the legacy oil assets. Right now, we've got a total of 7 producing assets there, but really the bulk of our production comes from 4 key blocks or 3 key blocks, with Kura being 2 separate agreements. WD4 does about 40% of our production right now. WD8 does about 20%, Kura does about 30%, and our small non-core assets, Fyzabad, San Francisco, Bearcore, and New Dome combined do about 10% of our production. In February, production was just under 1,400 barrels a day. And one of the key things that we did in 2021, Scott did a great effort in getting this across the line as we entered into a 10-year extended agreements on those 4 key properties of Kura 1, Kura 2, WD4, and WD8 that gives us a running room into December of 2030 to continue to develop those properties. Looking at the activity there on the legacy oil acreage in 2021, we drilled 3 wells. We drilled PS 610, which was in WD4. That well came on beginning of January of this year and has averaged since then about 95 barrels a day. In WD8, we drilled 2 wells, FR 1815 and 1816. 1815 came on a little bit later in January. Initial production was about 100 barrels a day. It's averaged 50, and today we actually have a rig on that well optimizing production to get it back up to that 100 barrel a day mark. 1816 came on in February. That well flowed for about a month at 65 barrels a day, and we're putting it on pump actually as we speak as well, again with a target of 100 barrel a day production out of that well. For 2022, we have 2 wells that we'll be drilling on these legacy oil blocks. In Kura, G17 IL 8, 1 and 2 are targeting forest and cruise sands down between 5,500 feet and 6,500 feet. And you can see there in the bottom picture there, that is the surface location. Both of those wells will be drilled off of a single well pad to minimize our environmental impact and to keep costs down and move forward there. Looking at the Ortoire block, and the team will get into detail on all of these different prospects, but what we wanted to give everyone a look at was what we're doing there right now, particularly interest at Coho, where we've got facility construction going on and the pipeline going in. Over at Cascadura, where we're in the EIA review process, but we're also preparing the surface facilities. And over at Royston, where we are doing our testing there and getting ready to put together a field development plan to share with the ministry. Much like the legacy oil blocks, in March of this year, we were granted a 5-year extension to Ortoire, which really is a game changer for us. It gives us 5 more years to pursue some of the exploration targets that you'll see here shortly. But it also allows us the flexibility to prioritize the activities we'll have on the block in that time. We can look at development on a slightly different schedule. We can look at exploration when it's convenient or when we have windows for the rig. So it really allows us to find that balance. And it's going to be really, really interesting to watch over the next year or two as Ortoire goes from an exploration block to an exploration and development block.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Christopher George, General Manager of Operations. I will be presenting to you an update on the Coho facility and pipeline. Regarding the surface facility, as you could see to the left of the screen, there's a pic of the surface facility at the Coho 1 well site at the moment. That has been 95% completed. Most of the major installation has been done. Currently working on some of the smaller installations, which includes the installation of the gas meter, GC, flow computers, etc. All of these equipment has already been procured in the country and would be installed in the next coming weeks. Also, site facilities are also in place, fully powered by our solar power system, as we remain committed to have go green in terms of power requirements on site. Regarding the pipeline, as you can see, there's a picture of welding activities that has been ongoing for the last couple of weeks. The entire right-of-way has been cleared. It should be noted that a major section of the right-of-way actually lies along a pre-existing old road infrastructure. It's approximately 1.7 kilometers. That would have allowed us to really minimize in terms of the impact on the environment in terms of vegetation clearance. So that was really good in terms of the installation for the pipeline works. We expect to be continuing welding over the next couple of weeks. That will be followed by extruding of the pipe, trenching activities, installation of the pipe, and thereafter we would have the backfilling done. On this slide, on the left of your screen, you could see that we have the stringing of the 6-inch pipe along the right-of-way. That will be ongoing over the next couple of weeks, as well as on the right of your screen, you would see that there are some of the pipe sections that has already been welded. So we continue to move feverishly as we work towards meeting first gas for May, and we believe that we would definitely meet that target, as we have been having really good weather over the last couple of days, and that is expected over the next couple of months as we proceed to first gas. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. So moving over to the Cascadura facility project, the equipment procurement and construction are well underway. We've taken a proactive approach to the facility equipment process, with all long lead items being procured well ahead of time for this facility. We've also engaged with a local shipping and logistics firm, and they'll manage the end-to-end shipping for all the equipment. And this will help us avoid any shipping and supply chain bottlenecks. Our procurement process for the facility has been to bid for equipment locally in Trinidad, as well as Canada and the US, and then we move forward with the best option. The 3 separators have been constructed in Canada. They're currently being crated for shipment to Cascadura. On the left is the Cascadura 1 separator shown, which will be capable of about 55 million cubic feet per day from that single well. And also included is the Cas Deep separator, as well as the condensate flash separator, which is on the bottom right. And that condensate flash separator will take gas vapors that emit from the light condensate and divert it back into the system for gas sales. The 2 VRU and 2 recycle compressors are currently being built in Houston, Texas, and they're scheduled to ship in late April. These compressors will take gas vapors from the tanks and flash separator and boost them back up to high pressure for gas sales. We've sourced 2 compressors to provide redundancies in the system and avoid any significant downtime due to any equipment repairs. So each unit will be sized for about 75% of total capacity. So if one happens to go down for repairs, the other one can pick up most of the load and keep the gas flowing.
Thanks, Brian. Just wanted to walk everyone through the EIA process, where we are in it and what it actually encompasses. So the way that the EIA works in Trinidad is it is an environmental impact assessment that comes as part of our approval to move forward with the project. The EMA, who governs this, decided that this project was at a significant enough scope that an EIA was warranted. So what we did is we applied for approval to do really the entire development process of Cascadura. This EIA covers the construction of our surface facility up to a capacity of 200 million a day of natural gas, 5,000 barrels a day of associated condensate. It's got a total storage capacity of almost 10,000 barrels at the Cascadura A site. Plus, it gives us a line of sight for the Cascadura B and Cascadura C surface locations that Lynn will introduce to you shortly, and the wells associated with that, as well as the building of an access road to the south and a condensate sales pipeline that will take that to market with our partner Heritage there. This process kicked off in April of last year. We went through community consultations, we went through environmental reviews, we went through impact and mitigation surveys and emergency response planning. We submitted this to the ministry in December, and we should be notified by mid-May as to the status of the project and its approval. And to give you some insight on there, you've got kind of the 12 chapters that we had to focus on, and we don't have the leeway with the EIA process to make significant changes. So when we have a field development plan completed, we needed all of that to be submitted to ministry. And this was a 1,700-page document. And just for fun, that required 13 hard copies to be delivered to the various government ministries and agencies. So a really significant project. But with its approval, not only will we be able to continue with the construction that Brian has alluded to, it'll give us that clear path of the next 3 to 5 years of development at Cascadura to bring it on to its full potential of what we see as being 200 million a day of gas. Starting to key in on some of the other properties from a geological point of view and a testing point of view. We'll look at Royston first, the oil asset we've got there. And the nice thing about Royston is we've got a really good comparable field at the Pinot Barrack Pour, which has been on production at this point in time for almost 100 years. It's produced about 115 million barrels of oil and over half a TCF of associated gas. The similarities between Royston and Pinot Barrack Pour are excellent, both with respect to geology and depths and thicknesses. Royston is actually a little bit thicker, as is the majority of the Ortoire Herrera sands that we see. And you can see that our our original oil in place that Brian will just discuss here in a minute of almost 212 million barrels is pretty consistent with what you see out of that same Pinot Barrack Pour field. So this has given us, not only us confidence, but our reserve evaluators and other engineering and geological specialists that we brought into the project, confidence with how not only Royston should work, but the Herrera in this area should work.
So as James mentioned, GLJ, our independent reserves auditors, prepared an assessment of Royston at year-end 2021. They calculated the overthrust and intermediate sheets to contain between 128 and 212 million barrels of oil in place. This represents an exciting, sizable new oil pool discovery by Touchstone, and we're very excited over the years to delineate and develop it further. The subthrust was not evaluated by GLJ as the Royston 1 well did not penetrate it. However, the oil we've seen in the upper sheets bodes well for deeper prospects at Royston. So at Royston, we performed 3 tests, and I'll summarize the 3 of them here. The first test was at the bottom of the wellbore in the top of the intermediate sheet. That zone tested about 550 barrels a day flowing light, sweet, clean crude oil. The second and third tests were in the overthrust section of the wellbore, with the uppermost test 3 flowing at rates of around 750 barrels per day of total fluid, with about 30 to 60% oil cuts. We currently have the well on a long-term production test in that uppermost zone, with oil rates of about 75 barrels per day. Reservoir inflow and pressures are still performing well at Royston, and this is even despite the 2,000-foot downhole perforating assembly that's stuck in the hole across the perforations. effectively impeding reservoir inflow. And I think overall, the Royston 1 well, it exhibited, strong initial pressures of over 7,000 psi and very solid flow rates. And, the results we saw across the intermediate and overthrust have aligned well with the penile baric pore analog that James spoke to. So going forward at Royston 1, we're currently evaluating a drilling sidetrack operation, which would see us re-enter the existing wellbore and kick off at about 7,000 feet, and then drill out and evaluate the entire intermediate sheet, as the Royston 1 well, as it stands, didn't get to the bottom of the intermediate. As well in our completions, at Royston 1, we perforated, large gross sand intervals with our perf guns. And I think going forward, we'll definitely look to be more selective in our perforation intervals to reduce the water inflow.
Thanks, Brian. I'll turn this over now to Lynn and Zav to kind of walk through the development prospects that we've got here at Ortoire, starting at Coho and going through Cascadura and Royston. And again, this kind of keys in off what I touched on earlier, that we're moving from this exploration phase to the monetization phase. And as we get these infrastructure projects done, as we get Coho tied in, as we get Cascadura facility built and tied in, and Royston optimized, we can then select where we want to increase that production through development drilling on the individual properties.
We're having a little bit of conductivity issues with Lynn, who's in Trinidad, but I think she's there now. If you're there, Lynn, take it away.
Hi, Lynn. Can you hear us okay? Lynn, just to test your connectivity there. It seems like you can't hear us at the moment. Paul, perhaps we'll give it a moment just to see if Lynn does connect. If not, we'll carry on with the presentation. Perhaps come back to this if we may, or if you could carry on, that would be great.
No, I think I can carry on. I think when Lynn shows up, we can let her jump in there. If not, what we want to talk about now is really the development wells that we've got lined up throughout the Ortoire block. And apologize that Lynn isn't able to join us. She's our manager of subsurface, actually in Trinidad right now, in the field, keeping an eye on a few things. So this is our Coho prospect. This is the one that James talked a little bit earlier about, where we're currently tying in that well that you see. That's the flame on that map. But what we really see is there's another development location just up to the north, that you see. There's Coho 2. And the real key to that, as you can see, we move up structurally as we move up to the north. But on the other side of that little saddle that is illustrated there by that dashed green line. And we can drill that from the same pad. It's about 450 meters up to the north, and it'll access the other side of that saddle as we go forward. This is in the engineering report, so it won't really add a bunch of reserves, but what it really will do is once the team's got that pipeline in place, we can start to evaluate and expand the gas that's going into that area. So it's a pretty low risk opportunity for us to go ahead and bring it on. So that's the Coho development. And then if we move over to Cascadura, this is taken out of that EIA report that James had talked about a little bit earlier. And what you see illustrated on here is basically on the far left-hand side of the screen is our existing surface facility, or our existing lease that has ST1, the first 2 wells that we drilled at Cascadura on there. And that's where Brian and the team, along with Christopher, will be building the main surface facility. It'll mainly be a big knockout of liquids and condensate. The condensate will go down those green lines and then down to the south, and then the gas will go along that red dotted line up to the north, that 20-inch line. And that 20-inch line is going to be capable of about 250 million cubic feet a day of gas production. So it gives you a pretty good idea of kind of what anticipation is going along there. Lynn, are you back?
Paul, I was going to say, I think we may have Lynn back.
Yes, good.
Yes, we
day.
can
you
hear
hear
you.
me now?
Thank you, Lynn. Yes, we can. Thank you.
So Lynn, why
Okay.
don't you just jump in? I just finished up Cas A. If you can talk about the development on Cas B and C, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Good day, everyone. My name is Lynn Anderson. I'm the subsurface manager for Touchstone Exploration. One thing I wanted to point out, to date, all of our wells have been drilled on pre-existing sites. So this is a really important factor, because going ahead with this development phase, we now have the opportunity to high grade all of our locations, where previously we had used existing sites to minimize our environmental footprint. And we'd also hope to try and expedite some of the regulatory processes. But so going ahead with development, we now have the ability to high grade our geological prospects and put them in the optimal position. As Paul mentioned, Cascadura 1, ST1, and Cas Deep was drilled on the Cascadura A surface and the main facility. As we go eastward to Cascadura B and C development site, we have 4 pads on each of these 4 locations on each of these pads. Again, trying to minimize our environmental footprint, optimizing efficiencies for operating. And this will give us an opportunity to explore the upper sheet 3 and lower sheet 4. So we'll be targeting both of these sands in development going forward. I believe Paul touched on the NGC gas line, which will go to the main NGC line to the east. And we also have the 6-inch condensate that will go south to Heritage and Cats Hill. Right, so this brings us to Royston, which was our last well that we drilled. Development in Royston will initially focus on the intermediate and the subthrust. The reason for this is because analogous fields in Trinidad have proven that the intermediate and the subthrust are the most prolific sands. So we'll be focusing on this initially. To the right of the screen, you can see a seismic section. The trajectory in purple and blue, that is Royston, which penetrated the overthrust and also went into the intermediate. You can see that we penetrated the overthrust in the crestal position, and the trajectory then went on to the southern limb or southern flank of the intermediate limb. Also on this section, you can see there are a number of development wells noted in red, all targeting the various sheets and different sands. You'll also see 2 exploration wells noted in black. Number 2 is Kraken, which is targeting the Cretaceous. And over on the right-hand side, we also have Steelhead, which is going to target Karamat sands, entirely different play than what we've done so far. On the left side of the map, we have the little diamonds are showing our surface pads. Once again, we're utilizing these pads to drill multiple wells, and again, just reduce our environmental footprint. The seismic section on the map is dashed in red, and that is what is shown in the seismic section on the right-hand side. That was from our recently acquired Ortoire 2D seismic program, and that is line 40 that you see there. I just wanted to note too that for Coho, we have submitted a field development plan, declared commerciality, and we have received approval on our field development plan. For Cascadura, we declared commerciality, we submitted the FDP, and just awaiting feedback from ministry. And Royston, we have sent in a notification of discovery, and we'll be proceeding from there. Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry. Yeah, I got it. Thanks, Lynn. I'll pass this on to Zav, who will be able to do a much better job of discussing the exploration prospects we have here in Ortoire. What we'll focus on initially is what we call our phase 2 exploration prospects, which will encompass what Lynn had just touched on, Kraken, Steelhead, and we'll take a look at bass and guabine. And then a little bit later, we'll have Zav just go into some of the additional prospects we have coming on the back end of that. So Zav, I'll let you take it away.
Hi, good day, folks. I'm Xavier Munan, the Exploration Manager, Touchstone. As Lynn alluded to in the previous slide, we talked about the Kraken prospect, which is quite exciting. And it's quite exciting indeed because we tied this play back to the Guyana-Suriname basin, which, as you know, is a regional hotspot in northeastern Latin America. We've actually done some recent work with Geomark, a regional geochem company, who have basically typed the oils that we've acquired from the Royston well, and those actually type perfectly back to the Guyana-Suriname basin Cretaceous play. So this Cretaceous play is targeting similar type sandstones sourced from the Guyana Shield, and it's all being overlain by very thick marine sediments. So this play type occurs within the Ortoire block, and we know that that it occurs actually coincident quite below the Royston feature itself, so it can be targeted from the same pad. So Kraken, it would be the first onshore Cretaceous attempt in 15 years. So it's quite a highlight for the country on the whole. And it potentially may be the 7th deepest onshore well ever drilled. In vicinity of the Ortoire block itself, we've looked at all of the Cretaceous wells across Trinidad. And in vicinity of the Ortoire block, we've got the Exxon drilled Iguana River well to the south of us, and we've got the Talisman wells to the north of us, and we've got a good handle of the play now. And the fact that Royston has hydrocarbons tells us that the Cretaceous there has a pretty good chance. So now move on to Steelhead. Steelhead is basically targeting another part of the block, the Ortoire block itself. We wanted to really fully evaluate this block laterally and extensively, right? And in this play, we're targeting a feature on the southernmost part of the block itself. So that gives us a tie in at that area. And we will be looking at the Karamat sandstones here and the Herrera sandstones. And those sandstones are both based on modeling. They pinch out onto the northern flank of the lizard anticlinal structure. So that cross section you see at the center there, you see the sandstones, the yellow sandstones, all climbing up this very steep anticlinal feature there. That's the lizard anticline. And we're basically targeting an area where those sandstones are then being imbricated on the northern flank of it. So that's Steelhead. Another good thing about Steelhead is that it's accessible through the same road that we've also built for the Royston area. So pad and road are basically easily accessible. Moving on to the guabine and bass prospects. So these prospects are again targeting Herrera sandstones. Guabine, to start with first, it's actually got 2 well penetrations, and it's quite a broad feature, very broad anticlinal feature south of the Cascadura area. We've got 2 wells, Castle 87 and 89, both which found 1,500 feet of highly resistive Herrera sandstones, but were not tested due to complications in the wells. And we've actually mapped this feature based on 2D and 3D seismic, and we see the feature climbing even further towards the east of those wells. So we plan to target that up the potential. Moving on to bass. So bass was a feature that we saw on the Southern Basin Consortium 2D seismic lines, which were acquired back in the 1990s. And we saw that on one of those lines, and our recently acquired 2D seismic was able to highlight it on 2 further lines towards the west of it. So it confirmed the structural feature. So we see a nice three-way dip closure feature in that area as well. In the Coho area, so we already spoke of Coho 1 and the potential at Coho 2. Coho, if you look at the seismic section and to the right of the picture, you see a pop-up sort of triangular shaped feature. That's where we are going to produce the Coho gas from. Just to the north of that and to the south of that, there are two subthrust sheets. So we got the Yarrow feature to the north and the Gibber feature to the south. If you look at the seismic section to the left, there's a large fault which down throws the Herrera sandstone shown in yellow there. And there's an amplitude feature there that we have mapped up as the Gibber feature. So there are a series of near field exploration that we can target here and potentially tie back to Coho facility. And moving on to the Chinook area. So Chinook, we basically drilled, again, from an existing pad to reduce the environmental footprint. This was at BW7. We drilled and we were able to confirm hydrocarbons in 3 sheets, 3 structural sheets, the overthrust, intermediate, and subthrust. Got great logs over it. We see that the feature climbs based on 3D seismic towards the east. And so we've got 2 sites over there that we want to potentially target this resource.
Hi everyone, my name is Ray Edigoville, the HSE manager for TOUCHSTONE. So our goal at TOUCHSTONE is to be an industry leader in Trinidad in corporate governance as well as environmental and social responsibility. So one of the decisions we made as a leader in the industry is to hire local staff. About 5 years ago, we did an organizational restructure and we focused on local Trinidadian staff within the organization to build their careers as well as provide opportunity for growth. TOUCHSTONE now employs about 94 full-time staff, 15 of which are at the head office in Calgary that have mentored the 79 staff in Trinidad. It's important to know that all 79 employees that are in Trinidad are indeed Trinidadian. At TOUCHSTONE, we also believe in equal opportunity and we value diversity in the workforce. So we provide equal employment opportunity for all employees and don't discriminate based on gender, race, sexual orientation, age, marital status, or disability. And for an example of that, 24% of the workforce are women, which is more than the double industry standard in Trinidad, which is 12%. Moving on to incidents, we had 0 lost time incidents in 2021, and so far 0 as well for the year to date for 2022. In the environmental part, whilst we also continuously strive for 0 incidents, unfortunately we did have 1 incident in 2021. However, we're proud to say that it was the only environmental incident we've had in over the last 2 years. Furthermore, as we laid out in our inaugural sustainability report, when it comes to the environment, not only are we following the environmental standards locally, but our goal is to significantly exceed them. So the team has been working diligently to put a plan in place to mitigate total vented gas on our development blocks. And our objective is to achieve and capture all solution gas from our wells and sale facilities to sell or to use back in our operations. Additionally, over the last few years, we've been aiming to eliminate all surface release water. And to date, we're proud to say that all our blocks, excluding 1, now have 0 effluent release. We're working hard to find a solution for the last final block in WD4, where we hope to have 100% of all our produced water injected back into the ground by early 2023. Looking at safety of all our stakeholders, TOUCHSTONE has initiated steps with the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago to renew our Safe to Work certification. This is a local certification program for contractor HSE management systems. And with this process, it would not only create opportunities for increased work in this sector, but would effectively help TOUCHSTONE continue to demonstrate that we govern our business according to industry best practices. Also, it would show that we meet all legislative requirements and effectively manage our risk and continue to do so. Finally, we're committed to giving back to the communities in which we operate. A committee was established to meet and ensure that we are having the greatest impact within our communities. In addition, we also hired a community liaison who is out in the community regularly speaking with residents, charities, government officials, representatives, regulatory bodies, you name it, schools, and so on, to ensure the contributions we make as a company touch as many people as possible.
Thanks very much, Rhea. Appreciate that. I hope this has given everybody a pretty good overview of what we've got in front of us. You know, I think when we take a look at it, we really got four producing assets now that, you know, one of them is on stream. That's our legacy oil asset. We'll add Coho, Cascadura, and excuse me, Royston this year as the other three producing assets. And it really will be a step change for us, you know, go from where we are today at roughly 1,400 barrels a day to something north of 10,000 BOEs a day before the end of the calendar year. And, you know what, I think the other thing that hopefully people will take away from this is the depth of the inventory of opportunities we have on the island in Trinidad. You know, it really is a multi-year program in what we have. So I think it's really important to just understand that that's, you know, that's what we've been developing over the last number of years, is this large land base that has endless opportunities, really endless opportunities. As we drill every well, we learn something new for sure. You know, it's maybe not as exciting right now as it has been in the past, and drilling some of these exploratory wells, you know, building the shiny silver things that the engineers love to do, and getting this stuff on production, as I say, isn't as exciting as drilling some of the big exploratory wells. But really, the key now is to take this from being what I would say is basically a pure exploration company into something that's going to be a mid-cap production company with a really exciting exploration bent. And, you know, when you look at the Karamat, you look at what we've got in the Herrera, and you look at the Cretaceous that Xavier and Lynn have talked about, yeah, I think it's going to set up a really interesting balance going forward. So on that note, I'll turn it back over to Paul, and maybe you can field some of those questions, Paul.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you to all the team for updating investors today in the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the company take a few moments to review those questions submitted today, I'd like to remind you the recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Paul and the team, obviously, we received a number of pre-submitted questions from investors today, and we focused on several specific areas, and thank you to everyone who's submitted those so far. Perhaps I could start off with the first one, Paul, and you can just direct that to the member of the team. It's appropriate to do so. It reads as follows: are Coho and Cascadura developments on track? Might there be more delays?
Yeah, I think Christopher covered that off. Christopher and Brian covered that off pretty well. I mean, we're looking at first gas in May at Coho, and you know, touch wood, the real thing there is weather. I mean, we've got everything in country, so that's just going to be our case there. But we've built in some time for those rainy days, so we're pretty comfortable with that. And then September is really driven at Cascadura, is really driven by the EIA process, and I think James did a great job of outlining how complicated that is. And I know that Rhea and her team were on the ground putting that together, and we've been working close with the ministry. I was actually in country last week, had a good meeting with the ministers, and you know, that May date that's set out there is not only one that is sort of an indication, it's actually in legislation for them to work to that date, and the ministry is trying to do something sooner for us. But we've built around that May approval. As Brian pointed out, you know, things are getting shipped from Houston, things are getting shipped from Canada, and they're going to be down there in May, June. So, you know, even if we got the EIA approved a little bit earlier, really we're still going to be waiting on parts. So we're doing this parallel process and working through to that September date.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paul. Next one we've got here, which I think we have touched on a little as well, is what are the Cretaceous potential of the Ortoire license area? How many leads and how big?
Yeah, I'm going to turn that one over to Xavier if he's still there to talk about it, because it's a play that's not only big for Ortoire, I think it's big for the country as well. But Zav, can I turn that over to you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like, it's like I said, it's gonna be, you know, the first test of this play in like 15 years, right? It's been tested in other parts and stuff, and I mean, we know that there are leads in other places, but we will like to evaluate it in Ortoire first, and see how it works out. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that, Paul, is yes, we do see other leads. They're not on lands that we currently control, so we're not going to show anybody or talk about them too much. So leave that with us.
Sounds like a good idea. Next question we've got here is, please talk us through the future drilling plans at Touchstone, covering Coho, Royston, Cascadura, Chinook, and exploration.
Yeah, I think when, and I know a lot of shareholders are really interested what our plan is as far as where we go next, and that's going to be again driven by how quickly we get the EIA, and once we've got a clear view of Cascadura coming on, I think Scott will be a lot more comfortable to kind of let us go do things. I mean, we've been telling people since day one that that since we had these discoveries that we were going to manage these assets with minimum dilution. We did some raises to drill the wells, but Scott's got us in a position now where we're funded to get this on production. So that's going to be the focus. But once we get the drilling program going, it'll start probably on two fronts. The two wells at Coho are obviously ready to go on the legacy assets. And then the next one, as Brian talked about, will be that sidetrack at Royston, so we can get back down into the intermediate and see what's going on there. But at the same time, the quickest production adds and the highest netbacks are going to be around the infrastructure that we'll have in place by the end of the year, which is that Cascadura facility, Coho. The advantage of having all that pipe in the ground now in those facilities with excess capacities as we drill wells that come on very quickly. With the EIA, we don't have to go back for a bunch of applications at Cascadura. We can basically bring those additional 8 wells if they're successful on production. So, that sounds like a very roundabout way to answer that question. But when we're ready to go, the first wells will be the sidetrack at Royston and the 2 Coho wells once we get going. But we're hoping after that, it basically is just a continual drilling program. And when we come back to talk to you next year, we'll be talking about the development we've been doing at Ortoire, the development we've been doing at the legacy prospects, and then maybe a couple of exploration wells along the way. But remember, with that 5-year extension, there's absolutely no pressure on us to do the exploration wells right away. So we can kind of high grade. It's one of the first times that the company's really been in a position where we can high grade some of the assets. We can now pick and choose those that give us the better rates of return, and that's obviously what our focus will be.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. And I think next 2 questions really relate to what is the potential of Royston Deep, and might you sidetrack Royston 1, and what is the plan for the development of Royston? Again, I think some of this we've actually covered off just previously and through the presentation. Next one we've got here, a lot of the drilling has had downhole issues over the last few years, which has caused delays. What are you doing to correct these?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and so it's correct. We have had a bunch of issues, and I'll say that part of that, we've now minimized. We've brought in some additional expertise from around the world and in Trinidad, and we've also brought in equipment. We have a new drilling rig that's really designed specifically for doing this kind of work in the Ortoire area. That's the Star Valley rig that we brought in. But I don't want anybody to underestimate how complicated drilling is in Trinidad. It is a very difficult place to drill. And if you want to look back, you can look back at Exxon, Talisman, even these shell wells that we're keying off on the Ortoire block. The main reason most of them never got tested is they got stuck down hole, left fish in the hole, they lost the wells. So, we've got some pretty big guys that have had similar problems to us. We're going to improve it. I think we recognize that's an issue, but it's a challenging area. But I think with the new equipment that we have, some new methodology, quite frankly, what we've learned, I think we're in a really good position to minimize that going forward.
Paul, perhaps we'll take a couple more of the pre-submitted ones. I see you've got quite a number coming through during the meeting itself as well. Next one we've got here is, what is the funding plan for the activity? Will it involve an equity issuance, and when might you pay a dividend?
Yeah. Scott and I, this is a continual discussion. I know it's a question that we have, but the funding part, we specifically fully drew the available credit at the end of the year last year. So we'd have lots of cash on the balance sheet to get these 2 projects on, and that is our focus. That is what we're doing. It's that simple, because once those come on stream, we get a significant amount of cash from day one, and that then funds the project. And that's just the logical thing for us to do. On the dividend side, we talk about that at the board. We talk about it in management. And the real trade-off is going to be, do you want to pay part of the dividend, or do you want to take all the cash and invest in the opportunities that Lynn and Xavier and the whole team have put together? I think you've seen the potential and the opportunities as we go forward. So let us get to stage 1, which is on production, and then we'll talk about it. But the model definitely kicks out excess cash flow, probably more than we can spend on the island. So the dividend is the logical outcome down the road for sure.
That's great. And the final one we've got here is, can you talk us through the Trinidad fiscal terms?
Yeah, I would suggest my answer to that is no, because we don't have enough time, and we wouldn't have if we used the whole hour. But I'll maybe just hand it over to Scott, and he can just give you a real sort of quick thought on that.
Sure. My short answer is it's complicated, especially for a small E&P company such as ourselves. But high level, I'll start with royalties. Any hydrocarbon produced in Trinidad is subject to 12.5% crown royalty, we'll call it. That's our legacy oil blocks and our Ortoire property. And we do pay an additional royalty to Heritage on our legacy oil blocks only. And that is because we essentially sublicense those lands from Heritage, who is licensed from the government. So legacy oil properties, we anticipate about 35% all-in royalty at these higher oil prices. And like I said, with Ortoire, it's only 12.5% going forward on any product. We also have an SPT tax, which I'm sure most investors are aware of, and that is calculated quarterly and only applicable to oil and natural gas liquids. So it's not applicable to gas in Ortoire. It's calculated quarterly based on your average realized price. And once you get over $75, there's a 18% tax, which is calculated on your revenue less your royalties. So it does kick in, and we are subject to that tax, especially in this quarter as the crude oil prices increased. There are credits offsetting that. So 25% of our allowable drilling credits can go against that tax. So for instance, the 3-well program we did in Q4, those pools are actually allocated towards our Q1 SPT. So we do have a reduction there based on drilling. So I will just, I guess, just reiterate that it's not on gas in Ortoire. And so as we move forward, we can kind of high grade our product mix, or high grade, I guess, our next drilling. What we found, of course, we're going to produce, but that is the best way to ensure we have the optimal tax strategy going forward. And then lastly is that PPT, which is just, we'll call it the standard corporate tax. That was calculated annually on an entity basis, and it would be a typical corporate revenue less all your expenses, also less your SPT paid, and that's a 55% tax rate. I would encourage any investors, if they have specific questions, I'm happy to go through. We do have a lot of summaries that we've used in the past with investors and our analysts. So I can definitely reach out to me, and I'll get back to you.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the other thing just to mention on that, twofold on that is, one, there has been a lot of talk in Trinidad that they're going to change, make some changes to the Tax Act in the first quarter. So I guess they got to announce it today if they're going to do that. But I think it's I think it's something that the country recognizes there's room for improvement on. So we may see some changes going forward. But at this point, we certainly haven't built it into any of our models or forecasts. And if it does happen, it'll be a positive for us going forward.
Paul, I think that concludes the pre-submitted questions. I can see we have a number of questions that have come through, I think some of which we have actually touched on. We have got a little bit of time to go, so if I could charge you to click on that Q&A tab, and of course the company, if we don't get around to responding to every question, will have the ability to review those questions, and we'll publish responses where appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. And Paul, if I may just ask you to click on Q&A and just read out the question or direct it to a member of the team where appropriate, please.
Sure. There's a question here that is, what's the history of the Karamat sands in Trinidad and the Trinidad Fairway? Maybe I'll turn that over to Xavier and Lynn if one of you just want to touch on that fairly quickly. That's the prospect at Steelhead that we're kind of targeting there. And we did see it uphold in the Royston well as well. But Xavier, will you maybe touch on that, or Lynn, whoever is best suited?
Yeah, so the Karamat sands, they've been noted in previous wells south of the Barapore area, like the Saparia sort of area. They produce out in the Balata East area and as far south as the Antilles in this sort of area, which is like southwest of Ortoire, right? So they have produced in the past, and they're understood to be thinner than the Herrera, but laterally potentially extensive.
Thanks, Jeff. One of the other questions in here is, in the future, will you be using 2 drill rigs to drill future wells? I think the short answer to that is yes, we've been looking at that. Because they're so geographically far apart, Ortoire and our legacy prospects, I think in the future what you would see is 1 rig being used down the legacy lands as we need it, and then a continual drilling program for the bigger rig up at Ortoire, which would be, sort of jumping around between Coho, Cascadura, Royston, and then the odd exploration well in the middle of there. So that program will just be prioritized on where we get the approvals on what we're looking at doing. There's another question here about will CAS B and C target new gas pools, or is it in the existing gas pool? And maybe Brian, you could just touch on that with the way we dealt in the engineer in the reserve report.
Sure. So yeah, as noted, the CAS B and C sites are spaced across the structure. So all the wells off those sites would target the existing structure. However, we do have a couple wells off of C that actually will push boundaries out for the book structure. So there is potential for obviously reserve growth over time as we continue to step out and prove up thickness of the structure with each well.
Thanks, Brian. And then Ian sent in a question here that says, has the EMA requested further information regarding the submitted EIA that may lead to any delays in authorization? It's a great question. We had a fulsome discussion on that last week, and maybe Rhea, you could just kind of walk through what the EMA was telling us last week on sort of how that process works up to the May deadline that James had put out.
Sure. If they do ask for any further information, the time frame that they've allotted to give us feedback, we would be able to give them back any information that they require and still meet the 80 working day deadline that the law holds. So that way there shouldn't be any delays, even if they ask for any further information on the EIA. To date, we haven't received anything back as yet.
Thanks, Rhea. The other question around the EIA was around the stakeholder meetings that we had, and what was the input around the stakeholder meetings. And I'll just jump in here, but if anybody has anything to add, we did have a number of different stakeholder meetings, and there was the real main concern was local content and employment in the area, and I think it's fair to say that we've done our best on that. And as these wells come on production, we'll even see more employment in the area from a point of view of we're looking to hire a number of local operators for all the facilities, which also means security, maintenance, all of those things in the area. So that will get that added on. That was probably the biggest issue and probably our biggest challenge in what we do out in that particular area when we take a look at that. Paul, I think we covered off most of the other questions. There is one more here. I'll maybe turn this back to James. And that is, will the Royston sidetrack test the subthrust? Is the Cascadura subthrust still a target of interest?
The subthrust is definitely a target of interest at Coho, at Royston, at Cascadura, at Chinook. It's tremendously good quality reservoir. It typically, based on Pete Alberic Pore, is some of the most productive reservoir. And specifically at Royston with the sidetrack, my answer to that would be it depends how things are going. One of the challenges with a sidetrack is you don't have a ton of flexibility with how you can steer it. You're pushing the envelope a little bit with how your casing is. So we're very comfortable. We have a program to get down to the bottom of the intermediate sheet. If we're in good shape as we drill, there's an opportunity to take a look at it. But we also have the Royston deep well that really is focused on trying to hit that subthrust sheet at the optimal position. That's just one of the challenges I think that the team has kind of highlighted throughout the drilling program that we've had is there's been compromises, and frankly, we'd like to avoid compromises going forward and just target the best possible reservoirs and best possible locations in these structures.
Thanks, James. One other question was in here. Can you elaborate on produced water from geological standpoint at Royston 1? Yeah, I know this has sort of spooked the markets a little bit. on the water cut. And I think, we've taken a transparent approach where we're disclosing all the water cuts. But when you look at all of the oil produced in Trinidad, there's always a water cut. We have it on our legacy properties. We have it everywhere. So this is really not unusual. And as a matter of fact, in what we're seeing at Royston 1, both in the intermediate and the overthrust sheets, are completely consistent with the penal Barrick-Core pool that's done over 100 million barrels. So I know the market has kind of taken that as a negative, but that's just the reality of Trinidad. So the key here is to deal with the water production as it comes up, and we're going to design it so that we've got facilities to re-inject the water right from day one. And as James just said, we'll obviously target those thrust sheets and those points in the structure that are highest up that get us away from the water. And as Brian also mentioned early in the presentation, we think there is some ways to be more selective in what we perforate in each one of those zones and stay away from maybe some of the faults or some of the sands that aren't as hydrocarbon charged. So, I think the real takeaway from Royston is Royston was an exploratory well on a very large structure that has now proved up 2 sheets that have hundreds of millions of barrels of oil in them. And now we can go back and work them up on an exploration basis and a facilities basis. So, I think that's a long-winded answer to the question on the water, but we're trying to be fully transparent here in what we're doing, feeling like we maybe are getting penalized a little bit for it, but we need to educate the market and shareholders that this is completely normal in Trinidad. This is nothing out of the ordinary for sure. The other one question here, and then I'll maybe turn it back to Paul, is can you clearly state when you will continue drilling and in what order in 2022? The short answer is no. And the reason for that is we really want to make sure we've got that EIA approved before we start to make commitments on the drilling front. And that is just simply a matter of managing the balance sheet so that we've got the cash to be able to do this without doing any more equity, right? I mean, that is the plan. That's what we've talked about all the way along. So as soon as we've got that EIA, as soon as Scott's comfortable, as soon as we've got the green light to do everything that we want to do, and we know that all of mainly our Cascadura data is firm. The Coho data is solid. Once we know that Cascadura data is solid, then we'll be able to put the plan in place. And it's going to likely kick off with Gura and Royston. That'll be where we'll go to next for sure.
That's fantastic.
Paul, I'll maybe turn it back to you. There's
Yeah,
a bunch more questions here I didn't get to, but we'll get back to them if we can.
Absolutely, and thank you and the team for answering as many questions as you can in the time. Of course, as Paul said, the team will be able to review all those questions and we'll publish responses where appropriate to do so. Paul, I am conscious of time, but if I may, just a last couple of comments from you just before I redirect investors to give you some feedback, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody got an opportunity today to get a real feel for how busy we are. I mean, there's a lot of things going on when we look at that. Even the Cascadura project itself. I mean, we're a fairly lean company building a 200 million a day gas facility, condensate lines, pipelines. We're preparing drilling locations. We're building roads. We're doing all of those things. So, as I said, it's maybe not as exciting as some of the exploration stuff that we've done in the past. But that's really what our focus has got to be, is to get that done. I hope you also got an opportunity to see the talent and the depth in the team that we've got. It's a really exciting team. It's fun to be part of this, and it's really a great opportunity. And I hope that comes across a little bit in the presentation today. So thanks for your time today to listen to the Touchstone story. Appreciate it.
Paul, thank you very much indeed, and thank you to the wider team for your presentation updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Touchstone Exploration Inc., we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session, and good afternoon to you all.